This is Jamie Dyer welcoming you to another edition of the Quo-Cast. And in this episode of the podcast, I shall be joined in a little while by Daniel Jordan as we discuss Status Quo's 1999 album Under the Influence, which turns 25 this year. I can hardly believe it. It's one of the first albums I ever got practically from new. It's the album with the pub sign as the cover, which led to the pub tour, even though the song Under the Influence has nothing to do with drinking or pub culture. This is an album that's seen as a bit of a return to form. However, Heavy Traffic has kind of taken that mantle in recent years. This is their first album of original material since 1994's Thirsty Work. It did moderately well, had a few very memorable songs on it. Their previous album was a covers album, Don't Stop, in 1996. That was a huge success, but, fans don't always look favourably on it. This, however, I think does have its fans here and there. This is the last album to feature new songs from the writing partnership of Francis Rossi and Bernie Frost. This album's produced by Mike Paxman. They made it in a few studios, including Francis Arsis Studio, a roof somewhere in Surrey, and Chipping Norton as well, I believe. So, yeah, let's start the discussion on this album by crossing over to my conversation with Daniel Jordan, which I recorded earlier this week. And the first thing I asked him was, do you remember what it felt like when the album was announced?
Yeah, so 1999, I would say, like yourself, probably in the younger generation. You grew up with the 90s, Quo, Jeff, John, Andrew, Francis and Rick. What I do remember of it coming out was, I think the first time I actually seen, because, internet then wasn't, not everyone had the internet at the time in 99. It was a fairly new thing for websites and info on bands, and I think I seen them on GMTV playing The Way It Goes. I was like, oh, right, okay, it's very radio friendly. And then obviously the album came out with it. And first listenings, I actually remember, because it's on Eagle Records, which was a new label for Quo. And I think at the time, Eagle Records were quite a cheap, I won't say the word cheap, but a budget label. Because I think I've seen you say these do really cheap compilation albums of like 60s, 70s, 50s, whatever, best ofs. And then obviously Influence was on that. I think might have been even Independent at the time. I'm not too sure. It was a unusual to cover. I say it just one thing. If I was to criticise the Influence album in any way, I actually thought the packaging of Influence as a whole felt cheap. Not to criticise the actual material, because it's not, but the actual, I don't know, it just didn't feel as good a quality of, maybe it's just me, I could be maybe it's how I feel about it, being a fan, but it just felt a little bit kind of cheap. The product felt cheap. The CD singles themselves, the covers is a little bit, not that doesn't make the album, but I just thought it felt a little bit below par in some ways in how they were done.
I can understand that. I mean, out of all of the albums I have, Under the Influence was so far the first and the only one to break in terms of the box. So,
yes, yeah, same. Mine's somewhere around here. The actual the inner fitting bust. Yeah, I just thought it was a very odd. I don't know. It just kind of felt like a cheap package. Like it was I know Don't Stop, which was the album before, it was a picture of the five of them, which I thought was quite good. Because I often, for sometimes felt like Quo's more about five members, not just two. And it just felt a little bit, it just looked a bit naff. The pub sign, I know obviously the pub tour came along, But yeah, it just looks very much like it looks like it is to me at the time a cheaper label's product. Maybe I could be wrong when I say that, but it just has that kind of, you know. Obviously, there was the alternative version with the bent fork, which
Yes.
the band wanted to release, but obviously that got given the elbow by, I think, management possibly.
Yeah, I think that is a much stronger cover, but in terms of
Yeah,
marketing, you could see pub sign,
yeah,
pub
it's
tour.
Francis and Rick together looking cuddly and yeah, in some ways it's that marketing of the band, the publicity of the band. You see Francis and Rick, I suppose, under the influence of the pub sign above the head. You'll then like the shield, like the in the sign. Yeah, it's a love hate album because I say for me personally, I look at that album and I love the album to death, but I do think the cover. I mean, you look at Quo's previous album covers that you think they can call them iconic. Yeah, it just looks a bit. To me, it just looks like anyone could have done that themselves. The
Yes, I always liked the image on the back
back cover, yeah,
that
yeah,
showed the
yeah,
band. That almost needed to be the cover itself,
yeah,
I
yeah,
think.
yeah. I agree. I agree.
Yeah. So let's skip straight into the material on the album, and we kick off with a song which was released as a single, I think, 20 Wild Horses.
Yeah, number 53 in the charts,
Yeah,
which is a real shame.
didn't chart very high, but I thought it was a
Well,
very
the only
strong.
time I can, yeah, the only time I can recall, I think there's one TV appearance to promote it, which was on the Generation Game,
Yes.
and it was the single edit version as well. Which the single edit isn't. I don't know. It just kind of it feels cut. I know that's obviously it has been cut, but it just feels a little bit. And it's just a shame that there was no publicity for it because it actually is a strong song. It's a really as an album opener. It's fantastic. It's got that little guitar intro and the opening lines. How do you do? Tell me how are you? I think great. What a fantastic opening line. It's like a welcome. How are you to the album? Which Quo, I've got a lot of good intros, but for some reason on this album there's actually a few tracks I think that could have been the opener. But they chose Horses, and yeah, it works. It's a good song. Obviously, it's been in a live set again recently in 2022. Obviously, it's like Strack Francis done it on a solo tour. So it's obviously a fan favourite of his to keep it in the set and appear, do it on a solo tour. Yeah, I think it's a really good song, but it's just a bit shame it was. Again, maybe it's down to possibly the record company, lack of promotion, because I want to say I found that on single, which I've got somewhere here. Where's it gone? Let me find it. Here we go. There's the CD single of 20 Wild Horses.
Hmm.
I think I was in HMV or they had a Virgin Megastore in Liverpool at the time, and it was just sitting on the shelf. Now I didn't know it had been released, so that probably doesn't help how it didn't do very well in the charts. Because as a fan, I didn't know it was actually getting released at the time. So yeah, I mean, I don't ever recall hearing it on the radio.
No, I don't think it was one that was particularly promoted
No, I
heavily.
say there's that one TV appearance on Generation Game, which I don't even think it was actually. I mean, I'm trying to think of the actual appearance on because it's on YouTube to watch. I don't even think it even gets a mention as being the new single. It just gets told there's Status Quo, and it's right there the Uddy play track. So how would you know what it's different now. Obviously, it's 25 years ago. There was not as easy to find stuff back then. Um, but yeah, it's just a really good song. Got a really great melody to it. The jiggy Francis guitar playing.
Do you think maybe it could have been a tiny bit heavier because it is quite
Yeah,
on the lighter
yeah.
side of
I
production?
suppose it could have been. It's one of the. It's not a heavy Quo song. I mean, the three releases they've done off the album. You got The Way It Goes, which is really commercial. You've got Little White Lies, which it was really, acoustic style. And then you got 20 Wild Horses, which is that kind of Quo country, like Irish jiggy, bouncy riff, which is fine. But is it radio friendly? Maybe not. It's not the commercial Quo, which obviously in the 90s it was all about, we know about how Quo are very commercial and they always try and go for, like the part ain't over yet, as an example. Or Jam Side Down, very radio friendly tracks. I suppose 20 Wild Horses goes more to, it probably fits more of a Quo fan than it does a Joe Public punter, I would say.
Well, it takes a bit of a while to get going, I guess. If you're
Yeah,
expecting,
yeah. It's got that long intro, which obviously I suppose radio stations will, it's bang into the track, straight into the riff or the main part of the song. Yeah, it's a shame, really. But I mean, I do think it's a very strong song. That obviously it's liked by a lot of fans. That I'm pretty sure. I think it's liked by obviously it appeared in. I mean, it was on the Quo in compilation in 2022. Probably why it was in the set for 2022. But we know Francis quite likes it because obviously it was on the solo gigs. So yeah, it's just it's just a shame. It's one of them songs that I think in Quo's catalogue that a bit like an accident prone. It's a could have been and should have been, but it wasn't. Maybe.
yeah. Well, let's move on to track number 2, which is Under the Influence, the title track. I mean, what a really rocking one this is. It kind of, whereas 20 Wild Horses starts big and then kind of fades down before it gets big again, this just keeps going.
Yeah, Influence. So that, again, that could have been a potential single, I think, Under the Influence. But maybe it's a bit too heavy, too fast, I don't know. Obviously, that was in the set for the pub tours they did early on, and there's plenty of footage you can see on YouTube of them playing it. It's quite a frantic song. That is kind of a more, it might be a bit of a tin hat moment for me when it's this, but it's a bit more of an older Quo. You could imagine that being something like On the Level, maybe. But it's a very good song, very well composed. I mean, it's nice to see you get the harmonica on it as well. So you get Andrew Bound playing harmonica, and he does the backing vocals predominantly on the track as well.
Mm-hmm.
When you see the live footage, I know you'll see Rick singing, but it's predominantly Andrew and Francis. Well, Francis lead vocal, Andrew does more or less the second backing vocal, which is nice to see. That track's a bit of a favourite. Francis plays slide guitar, partly on it as well, which is something that I don't think we've ever. Well, at the time it was a first, I think, to see him play a bit of slide guitar. And you see him in the footage where he's got the slide on his finger and he's doing all that, which is good. Very good track. Under the Influence. It kind of fits the Jeff's drumming. Obviously, he was known for being at the time quite frantic and fast. It fits in with that lineup of Status Quo of that era really well. That track, it's a very ballsy, 120-mile-an-hour rocker.
Definitely. The outro with the whole band going at it and then the harmonica, as you say, and you hear Francis kind of geeing everybody up, which I thought was
yeah. Really good track. I'm surprised that didn't actually stay in the set. Did they have a thing lately? The Quo always had that thing where they will, if they find a track that they like and they'll play it and it plays well, it'll stay in the set. And it's one of them tracks that a bit like they done Never Say Never, or All Stand Up, should I say? That stayed in the set for a few years as a live track, and I thought Influence was one of them tracks that it could have stayed in the set for a while, as one of them kind of, a modern Quo track that appeals. It's got that, if you only see Quo for the first time in 1999 or 2000 or 2001, and they play the Influence song, well, you know what you're getting. It's a modern Quo classic in a way.
I mean, it's too fast, really, isn't it? It's quite a fast number.
Yeah, I'd like to have seen Matthew Letley play Under the Influence, the track. They've been a good one to see him play because it's quite a, it'll be a lot of fills and swinging arms around the place.
I mean, there's still time for Leon Cave. They could sort of slip it into
I'll ask him. Yeah, it's a good. I think, you know what I say. It's one of those tracks that I've always thought it would fit in the. Obviously, it was 99, so it was a year before Jeff left. But I've always thought Influence is a track that would fit in well through the noughties with the band as a live track. It's the title track, obviously Under the Influence. For Punch to hear it for the first time at a gig, well, there's a track there's an album called Under the Influence. I'll buy the album. So,
Well, they've been playing Beginning of the End for years now.
yeah, exactly, and that's a strange. I mean, that's another subject for discussion. But yeah, Beginning of the End just doesn't seem to want to leave the set. I mean, was it 2007?
Yeah.
Yeah, 2007. I think it's been there since. So
Yeah. So let's move on to track number 3, which some might describe as a filler, Round and Round. What do you make of it?
Bound and Edwards, yeah, it's a Andy Bound Rhino song. It's I would call it a filler. It's a track that you sometimes go, yeah, it's okay, and then you kind of sometimes just go. It kind of starts a bit. I think it's a bit too frank, and I know Influence is fast, but with that kind of organ opening, it's a bit like being on a very fast fairground at the start. I always think, it's banging you in. I've never really been I'm a big fan. It's one of them tracks that some days you go, yeah, that's okay, and there's days you kind of go, yeah, it's one of them kind of. It is, as you say, a filler. It's not the strongest of tracks you'll be saying on the album, and it's not a criticism of it. It just with what kind of falls before it, with Under the Influence, and the track that falls after it, it kind of gets a little bit lost in the play of the album. I would say Round and Round.
Yeah, a little bit, because kind of feels like they've got like their opening riff with that organ, and then you've got, your chorus, but it just feels very by numbers.
Yeah, I think it's just that we've got this track where it fit in, and obviously Under the Influence is quite a fast-paced track. So Round and Round's a fairly fast-paced track, so it kind of, that could be why they probably plopped it in at the third position behind Influence, and thought, right, that's kind of flows. I know Francis always said about flow of songs with the live set, but that could be why they've kind of just gone, right, bang, bang, track 3, Round and Round. I mean, it's not a poor song by any stretch of the imagination, but it doesn't. It's not the strongest of the tracks on the album, I would say. It's not. It's one of the weaker ones. And that's just obviously my opinion. People might love it, but yeah, it kind of starts off with that. I say that organ intro, and then it kind of becomes a typical Quo shuffle. Well, that's not even like a shuffle, like a more of the countryside of the Quo, which I love, but it's just a bit of a mishmash, I would say, of a track. It just doesn't really, as the saying goes, tickle my pickle on days.
Well, track 4 is Shine On, which is quite a personal one for Rick, I think. And this is one I used to skip when I used to listen to it. But the other day I listened to it, and I always forget that halfway through that solo comes in and it gets heavier.
Blister and solo, yeah. Yeah, and again, it made the live set on that 99 tour. And there's a couple of bootlegs with it on. Heavy Quo, yeah. It kind of just brings that, you got the first three tracks of the album, which are all pretty up tempo, and then you just get this bit boom, 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 boom. The bass, the rhythm guitar intro, and it just brings that moody, bluesy rock, I would say, vibe to it. And maybe because the album wasn't as successful as it should have been, I think Shine On's one of them tracks where it's probably a Quo fan's favourite, but it's kind of lost in that album. Where if the album would have been more successful, maybe it would have been more of a known track. It's one of them songs. If you're a Quo fan and you ask play somebody a Quo track, what will give them a surprise. Shine On's a good contender to show them how good they actually are musically as a band. I say that solo from Francis is blistering. Rhino and Rick wrote it. They have a habit of writing really good. We'll talk about the other tracks later on, off the B-sides and stuff, but it's in the same mold as some of them where the evening sun went down, it's time to rise and shine. It's very Rick and Rhino lyrics, I've noticed lately, maybe because I've started listening to a bit more of looking at the partnerships of the writing, then you can kind of tell now, if you look at the lyrics of songs without reading who wrote them, you can kind of tell just by how they're done. Andrew Bound's lyrics, I often think, are quite tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah.
Rick and Rhino, generally a bit more moody, a bit more meaningful. And you can tell by the lyrics of Shine On, he's got that, you can just more or less tell by that it's their track. And I think Rhino, I think on the I could be wrong, but I think Rhino took a bit of backing vocals on this as well in parts.
I think there are certainly harmonies there. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a lot of backing, harmony vocals of Rhino, which good. I mean, at the time, there was no kind of vocals from real, standout vocals from him or Andrew, for Quo, apart from But I think I remember at the time when it came out, listening to it really, headphones, I was sick, headphones on, it blows your ears. Yeah, you have it on loud, boom, boom, you think, geez, it's quite a heavy song. Then you get to hear that, the harmonies, and you think, who's that? And you go, oh, it's Rhino. And I was at the time, I was like, well, that's quite good to see him getting a bit of a more prominent vocal.
Yeah, and from this point, it would be 4 years until he got a lead vocal on a track.
Great track, great track.
Well, let's go on to Little White Lies, which is track number 5 on here. This was a single as well, bit of lighter fare.
Yeah, but I think this is a fantastic. I mean, it's Rick's song, written by Rick. Now, what I found quite interesting with this track is obviously it's written by Rick, but the lead vocal is sung by Francis. There's not many tracks that, I mean, the only one that springs to mind is, I think, Too Close to the Ground, which obviously was a great, slow song. But Little White Lies, I think, is a fantastic. Again, it's 47 in the charts. It reached again, and it was done as a double CD pack as well. So God thinks if they only ever done it as a one single pack, it would have got, because obviously, you bought either one, each one would count towards their position in the charts.
Yeah.
So if they'd done a double pack, so God knows where it would have got for only being a one CD, which is a crying shame, because again, Little White Lies, there's only one footage of Little White Lies promo, and I think it's off Irish TV on YouTube.
Yes.
And you know what? It sounds daft. I know the miming, but there's a couple of camera shots in that, because Andrew's playing guitar on that, footage. And there's a scene where the camera is looking down, and it's got Rick, Francis, John, and Andrew. And it just looks so good, because it kind of, you think of Quo at the time, it was all, the commercials. That was kind of a slight sway to the lighter side of Quo, but it's a really strong track, really, really good track. And obviously Rick gets his little bit of lead vocal in it as well, which is nice.
Yeah, it's a bit of a throwback to the old singles where he used to have like a middle eight or something.
Even like Live on That Island will be probably the last song that you'd have seen it or heard an acoustic guitar, predominantly in the Quo track. It's just a crying shame. I mean, I do believe they did do a promo video for it, but it's never seen the light of day. I think someone said, I think I was told that they filmed a promo for it in a pub, on the pub tour. So they've obviously been miming at a pub gig to that track, but it never ever seen the light of day for TV, or I'm surprised it's not on like any of the compilations. It's not. Maybe it's just been, maybe they realised it was a bit of a flop and just, destroyed it. I don't know, but it's such a good track. Because you think of tracks on Party Ain't Over Yet, stuff like Familiar Blues, it's kind of very similar to that, a bit autobiographical, do we say,
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of a track off Rick's solo album, When I Was Falling in Love with You. It's kind of that same kind of lighter side that he could do so well.
Yeah, and Rick could write really good, ballady, slower songs. Some of Rick's strongest material, I think, It's stuff like Little White Lies, This Is Me, as I say, Familiar Blues, they're really strong tracks. And, might be a bit controversial, but, everyone sees Rick as the big hard rocker, which he was. But his writing stuff like Living on an Island, also is a big hit, well known, well loved song. It's a diversion from the usual Quo sound. But he could write some really nice ballads.
Lots of them in that catalogue.
Yeah,
For
yeah.
You, for example.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that again, that made the last set. Yeah, there's plenty over there. You think, it doesn't have to give that big throaty rock voice at times, because he did have a good ballad voice, Rick, I would say. Again, people would probably say that's not right, but Rick could sing some really nice, like This Is Me, as they off Party Ain't Over Yet. I think Rhino even sang that at the Rick Memorial gig.
Yeah.
Which shows you how much it was about. The lyrics he could write were really, you shouldn't. Now Rick's no longer with us. And if you sit back and read the lyrics of the songs, and you go, Jesus, they're actually quite, you could interpret them as being quite personal at times.
And as we say, Little White Lies is just another one of those. And I do love the outro, though, where they start singing Little White Lies, and you get Francis on kind of a monotone, just going Little White Lies, like I think it's just really effective.
It's just very clever song, and it's just I say, for me, such a shame it just never took off, that, because that could have been, again, one of them tracks, a bit like 20 Wild Daughters. It could have been, and there should have been potentially, but maybe that's down to lack. I mean, promotion for Little White Lies, none. There was nothing for it. It just kind of was released, came and went, and again, I think there's somewhere down here, somewhere. I think I've got them. So I've actually still got the original. If you see them here, there's the two CD singles. You got CD1 and CD2. Again, I found these. They've actually got the price label on from Virgin Megastore at $1.99 each. I found them again by the local store, by just walking into the shop. And I still remember to this day walking in and seeing the new releases and seeing these two side by side. I actually didn't know the single was released at the time. So that just shows you how much of lack of promotion there was for that particular record.
Let's move on to the next track, which is Keep 'Em Coming, which is slightly unquo-like, I think.
So Keep 'Em Coming, Andy Bound song. Only because I knew I was doing this, I gave this track a really good listen to again recently. It made the last set on the Influence tour. And saying about like the lyrics and the songwriters of songs, it's got that very Andy Bound lyric. And I think it's got some really, you might call it corny, you could call it cheesy, I'm just making reference to, Walnut Dash, Nod and Dog. There's just things like that. You think, it makes you, it makes you go, tongue in cheek, it makes you smile. Aloe spokes, leather trim, very much, it's about a car. And what made me think about it more so recently is that with that track is the fact that I wonder how good it would have sounded. Now we know that Andrew, how he sings with Quo, I would love to have heard Andrew sing this as a lead vocal.
I'm sure he would have done a demo at some point, and that probably exists somewhere.
And I think it would have it would kind of fit his voice. When you listen to him sing live with Quo, it's got, it's obviously his voice is different to Francis, different to Rick's. I think it would really suit his vocal, that track. Don't know why, it's just something to think. I could actually see him singing that. It'd fit in with maybe a solo material, possibly. But for me, it's actually not. It's not a weak track. Keep 'Em Coming. Again, it made the live set because it's obviously, it's that thing we say about the tempo of the Influence album. You go from the first three being up tempo, you go from Shine On, which is a bit slower, Little White Lies, which is more acoustic, and then you got like the bit of an intro again with the Keep 'Em Coming, and then it just kind of and then it just kicks in, and it's quite a right. We're back to the tempo of the first 3 tracks. Strong track. I quite liked it. It's one of them tracks over the years that I used to, at first listen, I kind of skip, not so sure. And I think I remember hearing it on the first time I would have heard this track would have been when they done that little album sample.
Yeah.
On the Way It Goes CD single, which I don't think was very good. It didn't give a true overall sound. I just don't think it was particularly good. That little CD mix of the tracks. But when you listen to the full track, you kind of go, yeah, it's actually quite a good song. This, I mean, I'd love to know why of all the tracks on the album, why that one got picked to play live in the Influence tour. Is it because it's they see it as a strong track? I'd love to ask the question to the band that, to Francis, Andrew and John, to say, why that one of, the 12 tracks on there? For considering that they've done The Way It Goes as a single, yet when it comes to the winter tour, it wasn't played. They picked, Keep 'Em Coming.
Which is unusual, like you say.
Yeah.
Especially as, to me, it just seemed quite un-Quo-like, although the riff that's played throughout it and obviously the guitar solo is quite interesting as well.
Yeah, it's very much an Andrew. I say now I've kind of sat back for lately and gone, look, maybe over-analyse certain stuff and gone, be a right nerd and go, and then it just jumped out at me. I mean, you can clearly tell that this is Andrew's, kind of style of writing.
Yes.
It fit. It's not. I don't think it's the worst song on the album. Far from it. It's it's one of them again. It's one of them tracks that you'd have to be a hardcore fan to maybe appreciate it, possibly. And it kind of it's one of them like tracks that appeared in it's one of them one tour live songs. It appeared and then just disappeared. It was there for a few gigs and then it just whoop, gone.
Let's move on to track number 7, which is Little Me and You, which is something of a throwback. It's sort of an homage to sort of that 50s rock and roll Elvis, Cliff Richard stuff.
Yeah, again, Andy Baum, obviously was the writer. I would personally, for me, this is my least favourite track on the album. I just don't get it in some ways. It's not a bad song, but I've just never I put it in the category of Hound Dog or Famous in the Last Century. It's got that feeling where you just kind of go, yeah, it could have been better. To me, there's B-sides that are far, far better than Little Me and You. For me, I just don't see how it made the cut. Maybe it's due to because Rick took lead vocal on the track.
Possibly.
Possibly that they thought, it's a Rick vocal. We'll have to but obviously there's not. I think there's Shine On, and this with Rick's lead vocals on it. So I think that's probably why they've decided to put that on, maybe. But yeah, it is as we say the word filler. That's for me definitely a filler. I've never quite. I don't know why, but I've never liked. Just me, where it changes, that slight tempo change, a key change in the song where it goes, I've got a heart full of big love. I just don't get that. I just kind of go, what?
See, I have the complete opposite opinion to you. I love this track. I love the kind of clean guitar intro there. That's a little bit kind of accident prone. I love the what it's referring to. I mean, I listen to a lot of the stuff it's referring to anyway. I love the way that it segs into the chorus like that. You hear the chord change. The solo's quite classy. I like the fact that it sounds like Rick, but he's also kind of doing an impression of every like rock and roller.
Yeah, it's got that like as you said, like that rockabilly kind of feel.
Yeah.
For me, I've often thought of that track. I mean, I quite like Perfect Remedy and the stuff around it. That track would have actually fitted probably quite well around like the Perfect Remedy stuff, I think. Some of the beats, it kind of reminds me of like the Remedy B-sides, like Rotten to the Bone and things like that. It fits in that cat for me, in that it falls around that like that. But I think they're Andrew Bound tracks as well. I think some of them.
Yeah. So let's move past that one and go to Making Waves, which is a Rossi Frost composition. I'm going to start here by saying this one goes a lot harder than you're expecting. And it's
Yes.
one of many tracks where that happens, where you're like, oh, there's a nice tune, and then it just goes boom, and you're like,
Yeah.
what?
I thought that middle little change in the middle. Yeah, for me, I think this is probably my, excluding maybe like the likes of the singles. I'm gonna call them album tracks. The ones that were just album tracks. I think this is probably my second favorite song on the album. It's just got that kind of Rossi Frost tempo. I was singing about this track the other day. I think it's stuff like Runaway, What You're Proposing, Run to Mummy. It's got that kind of jolly up-tempo,
Yeah.
It's not hardcore, lyrically it's not, macho. When I was a young boy, nothing much mattered to me. That's fine. It's really, I just have a real soft spot. But I think because when I got this album, when it came out, obviously, it was one of them tracks that stood out for me. And it's always been a firm favourite of me. It could have been a single. I actually think this is it's commercial, I think, Making Waves.
Yes.
It's got that change of tempo in the middle, a bit similar to All Stand Up. All Stand Up does something very similar in, halfway through the song. There's a slight tempo change, and it goes back into it full swing.
See, I personally think that with this, you've got that production that could be heavier, but with this, it works perfectly. Everything is nicely balanced.
Yeah, it is one of them tracks that, if you try to do a bit heavier,
Would lose
I think
something.
it would sound a bit too noisy. It wouldn't be, it needs a bit of a laid back sound, and obviously the tempo's quite fast of the track. I think it'd be a bit like when you listen to I Didn't Mean It. There's the one called the Hooligan version, I think, which is the heavier version, which sounds very brash and harsh. I think if you try to do that with Making Waves, it would sound probably very similar, like a bit too in your face.
Yeah, this is where I think Mike Paxman did a good job at kind of balancing everything, making sure that it wasn't.
Yeah.
It's not like you say. It's not like too heavy. It's just the right balance where you can hear everything, where everything is there.
Yeah, it's very kind of. I mean, I remember Mike Paxman done I believe he done the '98 re-recordings of "Don't Waste My Time" and "Whatever You Want," which gave quite a true live sound of the band, I would say, of the time. And then obviously Under the Influence comes along, and it sounds. I've always thought, you think of "Don't Stop," which was obviously the album before with Pip Williams as producer. It has that big production, big drums. You can tell it's like a big. There's been a lot of money put towards it. You can tell it's a big mix. It's all sorts on it. You listen to Under the Influence, this isn't a criticism of it by any means. It's much more truer sounding, if that makes sense.
Organic, I guess.
It's more organic. Yeah, that's a good word. Organic and natural sounding, which I think is the idea behind it. Obviously, they have to pick Williams, but Don't Stop. It was a big, big record sound. And obviously, Influence has gone a bit more to the natural sound of the band. It sounds a little bit. You can kind of imagine Under the Influence being recorded as a band.
Yeah.
As a band, whether they did, we don't know. But you can tell by Don't Stop it's so produced. Whereas Influence, you could imagine the band playing that. It's kind of in a room together in parts.
Well, I guess it's one of those. I believe later on there was this idea, that when they record an album, they should be able to go and play it live without any extra help sort of thing. And this is one of those albums overall, I
Yeah,
think.
definitely. Yeah. I think most tracks on this they've played quite a few of them live. They could. Yeah. I mean, go back to Little White Lies. I actually think Little White Lies, although it's acoustic, would have been a great track for the acoustic albums.
Yes, it's funny that that was kind of skipped over a little bit.
Yes, there's a couple. You think that would have been with the Gale vocals, the strings, but obviously it was decided not to. Maybe because it was already an acoustic bass track. Maybe they thought maybe not.
Maybe so. So let's go talking of acoustic bass tracks. Blessed Are the Meek. What do you think of Blessed Are the Meek?
My number one track on the album. I
That's
absolutely
unexpected.
love this track.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Maybe because it's a bit different. You got that big acoustic strumming intro, and the guitar riff melody. Da-da-da-da-da, it just sticks in your head. It's just a catchy, you know, line, and I just think it's for me. We can talk about the hellos, the pile drivers, the on the levels, and the hidden gems from them. I would say Blessed Are the Meek, for me, would have been a fantastic single. Because it's got an intro that isn't recognisable as a Status Quo track. Obviously, you'll recognise the vocal of Francis, maybe, but it's just such at the time, country music was kind of a bit popular in the
Yes.
charts in the UK.
It was starting to have a bit of a resurgence around that time.
Yeah, Shania Twain's and people like that. The Mavericks were all kind of big names, in the UK charts at around a similar time. I just think it's a fantastically, nicely composed song. It's got nice lyrically. It's a bit, different. It makes you kind of sit back and go, "What's he just said?" Francis obviously loves it. It was on the solo tour in 2010, 2011. He did actually start playing it on his Tunes and Chat tour last year, I believe. Then it was taken out to set. I think it's a fair favourite of Francis's. It's just such I think it's a great song. A nice solo as well in it. Got a really nice solo by Francis in it. It just shows his little skills of playing.
It's just pleasant, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
That's the only...
Yeah. It's better. It's more than that. I mean, some might call it a filler track. I would think this is... I know there's like Shine On and this, which you say are album tracks. Two different ends of Status Quo. You got the Rick ballsy, bluesy thing. Then you got Blessed Are the Meek, which is Francis's... speciality for me, playing tracks like this. It's such a lovely song. I'd say for me, if someone said to me, write down your top 10 favourite Quo tracks, potentially Blessed Are the Meek would be near up the top for me.
Wow.
Yeah, not many people probably say that.
No.
Except me.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yes. Exactly what I was thinking. But I can understand it because it's along those country lines. This is one of those songs that Latter Day Quo, I see a lot of fans kind of using puns in regards to the title. Like, have you heard any like "Blessed Are the Cheesemakers" and stuff like that? You seen those around where like
Blessed Are the Geeks and stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I just think it's a lovely song. I don't know why. I think again, probably on a personal level, when I heard it for the first time, it kind of woof. It was a bit of a, obviously prior to, I think back to the albums that would have had a strong acoustic lining for Quo. You kind of make you step back and go, this is different. And I've sometimes liked stuff when Quo have gone a bit away from the 12 bar shuffle stuff. I quite like sometimes. I mean, again, I've been to many Quo fans, and they've laughed at me when I've said, I love certain tracks like Blessed Are the Meek. I said to somebody at a gig a few years ago, and he was an older guy, being there since probably the early days, and we got chatting. He said, "What got you into Status Quo?" And when I told him Burning Bridges when I was 5 years old in 1988, he just looked at me, in disgust, just to say, "Really?" And he's like, "Yeah." I said, "That's what got me hooked in Quo." So, and I actually said to this guy, I said, "Because I'm a younger fan of the times, you can't just put us all in the same bracket of all wanting to be, it's not all about 1972 to 76, 77. A lot of us as younger fans have grew up with a modern band
Yeah.
or a more modern version of Status Quo, and I love all that, 60s stuff, 70s stuff, 80s stuff, 90s, since today. There's tracks that we all love and maybe not so much like. I could turn around and say it up like 4,500 times. I actually, a tin hat moment for me. I'm not a massive fan of 4,500 times. It's one of them that you just go, right, yeah, it's a good track, but it's not one of my favourites. And people laugh at me and they go, how can you say that? Well, I'd rather listen to Blessed Are the Meek than 4,500 times.
No, I agree with you. There's such a wide range of different tracks in that catalogue, covering different genres and different eras and different generations, like you say. And the next track on this album, Roll the Dice, another kind of filler, but I actually like this one. I think this one works.
Yeah, I used to actually kind of go, I used to have a habit of this track of just going skip. I used to think it was a bit naff. But over more recent times, it's actually it's one of the more heavier. It's got that Quo. You kind of nod your head to the riff to it. Quite like it. It's a Rossi Frost track. Now, I often think with this track, this would have fitted in possibly in a more bigger production, something like Thirsty Work.
Yeah.
Something like It or Not. It's a similar kind of vibe.
That is true. Actually,
it's definitely grown on me more. It's definitely it's got that 90s Quo feel.
Yes.
But with a more not 90s production. That makes any kind of sense.
I like how the verses kind of sound different and kind of gentle, I guess, and sort of plodding.
Yeah.
And then we go into that chorus, and it's like, oh, there they are. You're like, it's a little bit more.
Yeah, it's got that little drum intro. It just makes you go, oh, okay. It catches you. Yes, with them, Quo are known for having some good intros. They've got many good intros to tracks, and it's just because that, it starts off quite bright, then you get that bang. I walk along an empty street, and you kind of go, oh, feels a bit moody. It starts off, and you get like that kind of cut, and then that opening lyric of Francis, and you go, oh, clever. Again, this track I've often thought would be good on something like King of the Doghouse.
Yeah.
Whether it was ever in contention for it, we'll never know, probably, but it has that, it's one of them tracks that would fit in various versions of Quo or solo stuff.
Well, like we said, the fact that it goes from kind of one extreme to the other, he's got kind of a gentle delivery in his vocal, and then straight into the chorus, and then obviously the rolls at the end. Everybody joins in. I guess they were
I used to think that was quite cheesy at times. When I first did, I used to go a bit corny. But as I've got older and I've listened to a bit more and more, I've kind of it's actually it works. Roll the dice. Well, we've had down, deeper and down. So
exactly.
Who are we to argue?
I mean, arguably, this kind of the bit at the end that you say there is cheesy, to use your words. That's sort of the kind of stuff they do now. There's a lot of like backing vocals and a lot of of like sing-alongy things that I almost attributed to like Bula Quo and stuff slightly after that, but I guess it starts back here.
Yeah, it does. Again, this track would have possibly worked as a live track.
Yeah.
Because it has that, it's got that intro. You could imagine, Jeff coming in at the time, and then bang. But I think because it's got like, it's one of them. I'm gonna have to give it a good listen again. This track later on, because I kind of, it's one of them tracks a bit like Round and Round for me, where some days you'll actually go, yeah, it's a decent track, and then there's times I kind of go, maybe not.
Well, Not Fade Away. Buddy Holly cover is next. This was, I believe, recorded for a Mike Batt project. And I looked this up the other day. I believe it was certainly included about a year earlier on a Mike Batt project with an orchestra. And
Yes,
then
yeah,
this is
yeah,
like the scaled down version of
stripped
that.
back version.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that version. I don't know if I've actually got it anywhere, but the orchestrated version of Not Fade Away. I just don't see the point of this being on the album. When there's so many good B-sides on the singles, they were getting lambasted for doing Don't Stop and having cover versions. I just don't see. I mean, it's not a bad song.
It's probably a management thing again. Of like,
Yeah,
yeah, you can. It's a bit like Rock Till You Drop, isn't it? It's like it's got
yeah,
some great original tracks on there, but they've had to slot in a couple of covers because of Anniversary Waltz and the
yeah,
success of that.
yeah. I mean, looking at the B, we'll talk about the B sides in a bit. There's obviously B side cover versions for me, which are stronger than Not Fade Away. I just think it kind of doesn't. I don't know why, but it just doesn't. Maybe it's just the track list in order. It doesn't fit for me where it does. It just kind of you kind of go. I just think it feels a bit. It's a weak for me. It's a weak song. I've not. I don't really like the song anyhow. The original. I know the Stones have done a version of it, I believe. I just don't particularly like that track myself. Yeah, it's one of them tracks for me. It's one of them kind of skip for me. I just don't really. I can honestly say it's one of the Quo tracks that I've never been fond of from day one. Not Fade Away. It's not a bad song, but I just don't think it's right for the. It might have been a good B side, possibly, or as you say, it was on the Mike Batt project. Left it alone as that, or if it never seen a light today, it could have appeared as a bonus track, like they've, on something else maybe. Yeah, not for me, that one.
When this entire album is like the strength of the original material, it does seem a little
Yeah,
bit weird to
yeah, it's
have
an odd choice.
a
Yeah,
cover version there. So let's go past that and round off our chatter about the album itself with The Way It Goes, which was a single, very Quo-like, very anthemic, actually, and it's certainly one of those that takes me right back to that time. It's just got that moment in time stamped
yeah,
all over it.
it's very much 90s Quo in it. There's that inoffensive, good feel. You think of something like I Didn't Mean It. It kind of stays in the same mode of that. There was a bit of promo, obviously, on TV for this track. I mean, like, number 39 in the charts, which was a crying shame because it was a really good track. Really commercial. Yeah, it just kind of it's one of them songs of Quotes as a single that you think of something like The Party Ain't Over Yet as an example. Oh, I Didn't Mean It, as I say. There were bigger hits. Yeah, and this fits in that mode of them. It just seemed to, again, maybe it was like not say like a promotion. It just didn't seem to have that. Again, I think I remember buying the CD single for this in an independent record shop. Finding it. I think I don't know if there was ever any issues with trying to source it as a single. At the time, I don't know, but I did have. I think I've still got the cassette single somewhere as well of it. Yeah, it's a really good song. The promo video is very much that Quo, daft, fun,
Yeah.
good time. It's in the shopping centre, I think somewhere down south. Down south because from the north. Yeah, I look at that. I think at the time, I think there's a couple of young people in it with guitars playing it. Now, obviously at the time of Influence, I was only 16, so I was, I remember seeing that on TV. I think ran the promo when you get like little clips of it, and you think, oh, that's really good fun. Kids with guitars made Quo feel. I think that just going to the promo video for that, it made Quo feel like they're the normal kind of people.
Yeah.
Quo's promo videos have never been what you call big productions. Standing there under waterfalls, and it's never been exotic. It's just a kind of we've got to make a video for a song. Where can we go and film it? What can we do to make it appeal to the common punter, shall we say?
At least it wasn't a junkyard this time.
Yeah, standing there in wellies or in the desert.
Exactly.
But really good song. Again, I just think it's a shame that this song never kept its place in the live set. It really is one of them songs that it would have been a really good live set favourite for me. I said before about like All Stand Up. It stayed in the set for a couple of years. for me, the way it goes is that, similar mode of all stand-up. It's a feel-good song.
I do wonder sometimes with the heavy traffic songs whether the arrival of Matt kind of gave them this new lease of life, and so that's why those songs remained in the set for so long.
Yeah, possibly. But yeah, probably to say this is the modern Status Quo, this is the new drummer.
Yeah. Whereas with the tracks on this album, it's the last original album that Jeff plays on, so maybe there's some association there.
Possibly. I mean, yeah, because I think on the 20 on the 2000 tour when Matt joined, he still did 20 Wild Horses. And quite interesting, listen to the recordings of it, it does actually sound a little bit heavier. But for me, it sounds like Matt's drumming was a little bit heavier to Jeff when he joined Quo. Whether that's just sound, different drums, I'm not a drummer really, so I wouldn't know. But yeah, very, very good point. That could be a reason why. Because I think like something like Under the Influence would have been good with Matt to hear him try and play. There's certain tracks I think, Matt would have sounded, and not to knock Jeff Rich, because Jeff's a great drummer, but obviously we could hear a change in the sound of drums from Jeff to Matt.
I would argue that this is probably Jeff's strongest album in terms of drumming. Up there with Rock Till You Drop, with Thirsty
Yeah,
Working.
Rock Till You Drop, I would say, is probably Jeff's, and this show Jeff. He's obviously got something like Ain't Complain, which is very much produced. Not a bad album, but it's all, artificial sounds and production and, triggers and whatever else they use. But I think Rock Till You Drop gives kind of Jeff's live sound.
Yeah.
As a drummer, and that kind of, the album just sums up that era of Status Quo quite well. Rock Till You Drop, but Influence just showed Jeff as his variation of drumming he's got, and it's more of a true sound of Jeff maybe as well.
Yes, his drumming during sections of Making Waves, and you can hear how hard he's hitting it.
Yeah. And it's just, I say, it's a good album to maybe bow out on the original material.
Yeah. So let's talk about the B-sides for a little moment. So these B-sides, I think some of them were recorded after the album, weren't they? And that's why they don't always appear on bonus stuff, because they're basically a different session. They did several cover versions, like you say, some of which have appeared as bonus tracks, like I Knew the Bride, Nick Lowe, Dave Edmunds song. There's another one, isn't there? Sea Cruise.
Sea Cruise, yeah,
which is quite good, but it's a bit by numbers.
Yeah.
Do you think it was worth them doing covers at this point?
I often wonder. I'd love to know, were these potential contenders for Don't Stop?
Possibly.
Who knows? I think Sea Cruise would have been a better choice than Not Fade Away, because it's got that typical, the riff of Quo. I Knew the Bride, not a bad track, but it's very much of a, when you think of the B-sides of the 90s, it fits in with the mould of B-sides that, tracks that are around of that era. They've done obviously Pictures of Matchstick Men, the 1999 version.
Yes.
Which is just a modern version, just that lineup. It's great. At the time, I think we're okay. It's nice to hear Quo play that, and again, that made it into the set for 1999 as well, which was, I didn't see Quo in 90. I never seen Quo live until 2000s, so I missed them by a year. But I'd love to have seen them do it in 99, because it was very true to the original version of the track. And then when they done it in the Pictures tour, there was a slight different bit in it that wasn't in the original recording. You've got stuff like Driving to Glory, which I think is an absolute belter of a Quo track.
Yes.
Again, that could have been an album track for me. I think that was on the Benjamin Blut German release.
Yeah.
I think it was called Benjamin Blut or something like that. Very much about cars, which it was all about.
Parfit's vocal on that's really good.
Yeah, it's very much like The Madness.
Yes.
So like The Madness, it's a Rick and Rhino track. I can hear quite clearly here Rhino's backing vocals on Driving to Glory as well.
During the chorus, yeah.
during the chorus. Yeah, I just think that's one of the quotes for it's lumbered as a bonus track on a two-part CD set, which is a crying shame. Even on the re-releases of Under the Influence, it hasn't made it onto that.
I know. Along with Obstruction Day, like they just
Yeah,
left off.
again, Obstruction Day is a bloody great track. Rhino plays it in the set now.
It needed to be on the album, to be honest. Possibly where Round and Round is.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know.
You got harmonica, bit of slide guitar, just a really good number, and lyrically, it's really good. A bit. People go, "What?" And only when I've seen Rhino talk about it at one of his gigs, it was very autobiographical of a day they were having.
Yeah.
Him and Rick said it was stuck in traffic or something, and they used the word it's an obstruction day. So yeah, very good. Very. I remember the first time I heard that because it's on the 20 Wild Horses CD single. I just go, bloody hell. You got 20 Wild Horses as the single, and this comes behind it. You think, Jesus, this is a really wow.
Both lyrically very strong, as you say, although saying that there's a couple of moments in Obstruction Day that are a little bit, to use your word previously, cheesy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I slipped on the soap as I got in the shower. You know, that makes you kind of giggle. How many songs have got how many songs have the line "I slipped on the soap as I got in the shower."
Exactly.
I just find that quite daft and funny. But I mean, I've seen Rhino's band. I mean, I remember seeing Rhino in 2001 when he first started doing Rhino's Revenge gigs, and it was Matt on drums, and he played this track, and it was such a it was really good because Rhino tried to play harmonica on it, which he didn't do very particularly well.
Yeah. The other B-sides of this era, is it Analyze Time?
That is definitely a good choice to be where it is. Not a bad song, but it reminds me of certain tracks of the 90s of B-side stuff like "And They Do."
Yeah. Or She
It's
Knew
just
Too Much. Yeah, that
yeah,
sort of
and
thing.
tossing and turning. You kind of just go. It fits with that. You know, very much a Rossi Frost track. You can tell it's a Francis Rossi Bernard Frost composition. Um, it's one of them tracks that it just passed you by. You kind of go, whoop, right. Yeah, they've done that song called Analyze Time. There's not, there's a couple. Quo have had some really great B sides, and they've had some that you kind of go, it could have been, I can see why it's only a B side and not made it to the album as such. It's not the strongest of tracks. And you can tell, I think, with Analyze Time and then say certain tracks like that, you can tell by the production and the sound that they're not from the original Influence sessions.
No, they have sort of a different vibe about them, don't they?
Yeah, they sound a bit more condensed, I would say.
Yeah.
The actual sound quality is not as wide. It sounds a little bit more, compacted in.
Well, it's the same with Fighting with the Pack, which I think is the
Yeah,
other
yeah.
the other
Which
one.
technically never appeared until I think 2001 on that Rockers Rollin' box set. Yeah, a track that's kind of again, it's just in like it's just in the background floating away. There's nothing, it's not a track. I think many fans would go, I'm going to play Fighting with the Pack today, or I'm going to play Analyze Time today, unless you really want to dig deep into that, era of Status Quo. It's kind of just floating away at the back.
It's just there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's bring this to a close. Do you think that this album gets a little bit of an unfair rap?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say so because, people stereotype 90s Quo of being, corny, daft, cheesy, not like Quo Light, which I hate that term of Quo Light. I don't think that's fair. It's a solid album of original material. 5 years from Thirsty Work to, Under the Influence. And it's just a crying shame it wasn't more successful as an album. I mean, number 26 in the charts, which it's not a flop, but you think Don't Stop was number 2, I think.
Yeah.
and went platinum, 3 years before. Famous in the Last Century, which was a covers album, the year later, was more commercially successful as an album. Yeah, it's just an odd. I mean, I think I've mentioned this. The album cover itself. There's a slight nod to the '70s Quo logo.
Yes, you did mention this to me.
Yeah. If you look at '90s Status Quo logos, they've got like this. It kind of changed font, whether it's because of copyright or record labels ownership, or I don't know. But I remember looking at the album and going, the logo looks different. And then I realised they had like this really angled, gapped logo. It looks a little bit more true to the original kind of Vertigo early days logo.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I said previously about like the actual album, the package of the album itself. I don't recall as an album seeing promotion for it, apart from the singles. I don't say, I could be, was the ever, something like Riffs got a TV commercial.
Yeah, Heavy Traffic did too. Yeah,
Heavy Traffic did. Yeah, Famous in the Last Century had one. Don't Stop was obviously a big commercial success, and there was a lot of promotion around the band, good and bad, with the BBC thing around '96. But for some reason, Under the Influence just kind of was released. All right, they'd done the pub tour, and that got promotion as a pub tour. But I personally think that pub tour kind of detracted the public away from the album.
yes.
It's kind of like quoting your local pub. We've got an album out to promote it, but see them on your local BBC News, we're playing at your local pub. That doesn't make a punter watching the news go and buy an album. If there's an advert or, a press release or something to say, a TV commercial would have been perfect for Quo, or, something in the newspapers, new Quo album out. I just don't ever recall seeing much for the actual album as a whole.
No, it sort of got sidelined, I think.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Something that made me laugh with I've always thought of Under the Influence as being marketed quite cheaply. And this is from a personal, I used to think this at the time when I was 16. So when they were doing the promo work for the Influence material, Francis and Rick were playing Squire branded guitars, which were 100 quid, 150 quid each at the time. I used to think, Christ, they've gone really cheap.
Goodness. I mean, this is one of my favourite albums from them, certainly from this period anyway. Thank you so much, Daniel, for coming on and talking about the album.
My pleasure.